I spent 45 days in a row telling myself the day before, this is what I'm going to do tomorrow morning. And every morning I did that thing. And over time, it became very kind of like automatic, right? To the point where yesterday, when I said, I decided the day before, I decided a couple days earlier that I was going to take Thursday off. I was just like, okay, I'm going to take Thursday off, and then we'll kind of figure things out. Spoiler alert, I haven't figured things out yet. But it was weird. It felt weird waking up and not doing the thing, It's like I've been so used to doing this one thing every single morning for a while, basically, that it just like, I don't know. It's just like, now I know it's a habit, right? I know it's a habit because I didn't do it and it felt weird, right? If it just feels normal, like discontinuing something, then it's really not a habit yet. I think I saw Clerks in 1995, like in Riverdale, and a bunch of people were watching it. I respect the hell out of recording a movie on $5,000, and I wish there were just like a lot more like that reached kind of public consciousness instead of just always being these massive blockbusters. I enjoy a fair amount of Kevin Smith stuff, but it's no Robert Rodriguez, no. In my pantheon of filmmakers, who, in terms of like making a movie on $5,000, or I might be fabricating these budgets out of thin air. But you know what? We're just gonna look stuff up today. It's funny. I wrote a character who basically, anytime they don't know something, they look it up, and then I realize now that that's just me. I just like to look things up. Like, here's the thing about like facts and stuff. Like, if you don't know, you can probably find out pretty quickly now, right? I mean, it makes trivia, I don't know, trivial? No, I mean, like, if a Jeopardy question comes on Final Jeopardy and you want to know the answer before they reveal the answer, like, you can look it up. You can usually figure out the answer in the 30 seconds. Which sometimes I'll do if I just know that I don't know, right? It's an admission of defeat. Like, yep, nope, I have no idea. Usually I'll hazard a guess, though. All right, so 1992, El Mariachi, $7,225. It's low budget when they get the $25 in there. Post-production, $200K, and then box office, $2 million, yeah. Clerks budget $27,575, but then another $230,000 in post, and then 3.2 million box office. I think those post things aren't like for the first edit, right? Like for 7K or 27K, they made their film, and then they showed it to some people. Maybe it won an award, who knows? And then some people were like, "Oh, we'll give you some more money to clean this up and remaster it or whatever they do in post." I mean, if you want to like learn how to make films on a budget, it's like a 10-minute or 20-minute short that's just explaining how he made El Mariachi for practically $0. $7,000 is only nothing to somebody with millions, right? Oh, we have maybe a suggestion. The Ethical Panda says, I like the off-the-cuff talking. Maybe talk about your general learning process, how that 45 days went. Yeah, that sounds good. In terms of the learning process, I have like a kind of whatever works approach to learning. I like to structure things for myself for periods of time and kind of assess how it's working. In the 45 days, let's see, when I started off, the idea was basically just to bring together a group of people. Wait, no, that's the Avengers. Okay, the idea was to just make sure that every single day I play some poker, very focused, and that every single day I review some hands that I played while I was very focused. And I think merely doing that, without even having a great idea of how to review one's own hands, like, there is kind of only so much progress we can make without knowing really how to get answers from some of our hands. But there's still going to be progress, right? I mean, I think there's still going to be progress as long as we have some tools. So I guess the thing that I find like I can't not have any tools, right? Like I already have tools. Like I know how to use pro poker tools. Poker Tracker has a built-in equity thing. So the equity calculator being there, like it can't guide all of our decisions, but every time there's a post-flop spot, looking up the equities, or even looking up the equities pre-flop in the matchups, does contribute a little bit of extra knowledge, right? I don't think it's the most efficient way to study everything, but I do think that there will always be progress, and making sure that there's always some progress going forward, I think is a good way of avoiding stagnation, right? Keeping ourselves from not making progress. It's pretty straightforward that way. So, what I really enjoyed over that 45 days was I was learning other stuff as well and then bringing it into my reviews. And one thing that really helped was getting the pre-flop matrix. The pre-flop matrix gives me binary feedback, meaning like it grades a decision as correct or incorrect, at least in terms of, game theory optimal. If I play these ranges, I will not be giving up any value pre-flop. And since my opponents play however they play, I will actually be gaining value pre-flop because they are clearly losing a lot of value before the flop. So, that's one thing, right? And that's like in terms of studying chess on my own. I can always look at a position and I can plug it into the engine, and the engine will tell me like, oh, you should have done this, right? And that will just generally be correct. Particularly later on in the game with fewer pieces on the board, you're going to need a more powerful engine in earlier spots, and there are going to be some practical decisions, which is going to be true in poker too, right? And by practical decisions, I mean there are going to be spots where the bot is like, hey, this is what we should do, because I know I'm going to play perfectly from here on out, and the opponent's going to play perfectly. Therefore, this is the best decision. Now, if you're in a chess match or a chess game and you have 10 seconds on your clock and your opponent has 5 minutes on their clock, or you're down a queen, like you can't always just make the best move and expect to have good winning chances, because your opponent should probably then, like, the best move might be still to lose, but to not lose too fast, right? So that's something to kind of be aware of and look out for. These situations where the computer wants to do a thing because it thinks it's correct, but like that the actual situation against the actual person you're playing against, that's not correct. Like you're down a queen, maybe you gotta lay some traps, right? Maybe you've got to play more defensively than you would and not trade off any pieces, whereas the computer's like, well, we're losing anyway, and this plays like, theoretically not losing as much as this other play. It's like, yeah, but the play that's losing more, which sometimes in poker, sometimes that's raising a hand that theoretically, if our opponents play perfect, we cannot afford to play. But if we know they're folding 99% of their big blinds, like we can, it's profitable because they're doing a thing out of, and that's an exploit. And so that exists in chess as well. So understanding the limitations of these tools, understanding the limitations of the software and the bots and whatever, and kind of by understanding how they're programmed, what they're programmed to tell us, right? The pre-flop matrix can tell us this is the action you're supposed to take more than 50% of the time with this hand in this neutral situation without any additional factors blended in. And then you can start to consider the other factors, and you can not to try to justify plays that maybe aren't good, but in order to get a better, if the blinds play really poorly post-flop, you can probably play a little bit more hands, right? If the blinds are super aggressive, you can still play your full range of hands, but if you dial it back a little, you might actually have more success against them. That might be an exploit, right? So you have to kind of learn what the exploits are individually, and you can set up sims to do that sort of thing. Pre-flop sims are difficult, particularly in Pot Limit Omaha, because they require vast computer resources. My computer can handle some sims, but I haven't really challenged it with Pot Limit Omaha yet. The Ethical Panda says, is it fair to say that a part of the process is learning to read the current situation and evaluate how to adjust the general guidelines? Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. When it comes to adjusting general guidelines, like, I think pre-flop we can learn a little bit dogmatically and just be like, I am going to play this static approach, and that's fine, right? Because if it's the solver output, it basically gives us something that we know can't be wrong in terms of our opponents can't accidentally exploit us. They can't accidentally do something that makes our strategy bad, right? They can intentionally or accidentally do something that gives us an opportunity to make our strategy even better, to exploit what they're doing. And if we dogmatically adhere to static pre-flop principles, we can pass up some profitable opportunities, or we can neglect to sort of prune hands that are not going to be profitable against their particular approach. But just because those hands aren't profitable, that doesn't mean that like our strategy isn't profitable, if that makes sense. But I think what happens as often or more often than people like saying, okay, this is my general approach, and now I'm going to make these adjustments based on these specific real factors. I think what often happens is somebody says, this is my general approach, this is basically what I want to do here. Oh, but I want to do this thing. And oh, well, they're kind of bad, right? Yeah, so I'll play this hand. It's fine. And there's a lot of sort of self-justification a lot of the times. So I would say learning to read the current situation and evaluate how to adjust the general guidelines, learning how to do that in an objective, sort of like non-attached, like I neither want to nor don't want to play this hand. I just want to do what I think is the best thing to do, and to develop that process of really effectively and accurately and kind of dispassionately evaluating the exact scenario, right? I think that's very important. And it takes a lot, right? It takes a lot of learning. It's as much art as science, I think, like evaluating exactly how we should adjust. We can do that for pre-flop tendencies, and we can tell the solver, like, never 3-bet us. Okay, now what hands can I open on the button when it folds to me in a 6-handed game? And, the big blind just never 3-bets. We can get that data, right? But what we can't get without some massively more sophisticated programming of the software, because I think we could do this with some of the software, but in order to basically figure out what adjustments we can make pre-flop based on somebody never check raising the flop, right? Or somebody leading out on the flop 50% of the time. These are things that it's hard to like node lock for those. Node locking is basically saying, okay, instead of the solver just deciding what to do in a given spot, we're telling the solver, this is what our opponent is going to do. Now, what can we do? The trouble is that then the solver continues to try to play optimally for that player on later streets. So it's kind of hard to simulate poor play, right? So we kind of need to sort of eyeball it and figure out. And in Hold'em, over time, we can say, okay, I've played these hands in these positions. Have they been profitable or not, right? And then I've only played these hands half the time because I've only played them in good opportunities, what I deem to be good opportunities. Have they been profitable or not? In Omaha, that's harder because there's so many combinations. Like, are we ever going to get a big enough sample size to have true, like, useful empirical data, right? Can we figure out empirically, like, what we're supposed to do with hands in certain spots? I don't know. I'm skeptical. I do imagine there are some ways of trying to come up with figuring out, what hands, like grouping certain things. Like we could group like bad aces, like aces without a Broadway card, or like rainbow aces, or rainbow aces without a Broadway card, right? There's some ways that we could group hands, and maybe we could get some data that shows like, oh, playing these hands this way in these spots does, varies from the solver data. But like those kind of things, it's going to take so much data to really I mean, I think about how many hands I've played, and I'm like, I haven't played that many hands in terms of like really having a nice sample size to analyze. That was one of the things that I really wanted to do this month. So I'm going to kind of pivot into that, but I'm happy to answer any other questions. Yeah, like one thing I want to do kind of going forward is get a lot more hands in. And I also want to kind of grow the stream in terms of appealing to more people, right? I think what I've been doing has kind of a narrow focus in terms of it's really aimed at people who want to improve at PLO, right? It's like I've only been streaming Pot Limit Omaha, and I've been streaming every day a short session, one tabling. One tabling is not designed for maximum entertainment in terms of the poker content. It's designed for maximum ability to really dig in and talk about each hand whenever it comes up, and to never like have an unexplored hands kind of where it's like, oh, well, I was playing this and this was happening, so I had to just kind of click buttons and I was thinking, but I didn't have time to kind of verbalize everything, right? That'll happen with three tabling. I think I'll get better at actually talking through decisions while three tabling, but that's different. So we'll get to that. And then the session review is like very clearly like, who wants to learn, who wants to study, right? Who wants to study? And I do like the idea of putting my studies on stream. And I think this time slot, 10 a.m. Pacific, I am going to continue to use, and I'm going to use it mostly for review type stuff. And so what I'm going to do is this afternoon, I would normally be doing that 2 p.m. Pacific, but that's not going to work for me today. So it'll be a little bit later. But I'm going to 3 table this afternoon and kind of do a little bit more just like hanging out and playing poker. So there'll be more hands to talk about. They'll be coming like hand, right? But still there's a lot of folding. So there's a lot of time to just kind of hang out and chat. So we'll do that. And I'm going to move that into more of like kind of a chill, poker and chill, kind of like poker, just like a grind. Where not, it's like it's not a ton of tables where I'm not going to be really focused on what I'm doing or anything. But the idea is I'm not going to be trying to go really in depth in any hand. If anybody has a question on any hand, I'll pop up the replayer and we can talk about it as long as I don't have action at another table. But there won't be a session review, right? It'll just be like, I'm just going to play. 10 a.m., I'm going to open up the hands from the day before and do a dedicated session review. And it'll be a lot more hands. It'll be less pre-flop stuff. I'll probably do all the pre-flop stuff on my own. I'll have no stream delay on that. Like right now, I have no stream delay, right? So if anybody wants to come in and like really talk about PLO strategy and discuss some hands, that would be a great time to do that. And at some point, I'll maybe mix in some viewer hands, right? I will have the Ethical Panda on from time to time, and we'll talk about some PLO 10 hands, right? Because I know it's like not every viewer is playing PLO 100. Some people are playing smaller stakes. Some people are, not as far along kind of in their PLO journey. Some people are further along and, can offer advice that I will be very happy to hear. I think that format of kind of splitting up the session and the review, I think is going to work well. But we'll see. We'll see. I'm going to make some more YouTube content, but make it a little tighter. I've been looking at some of my old streams, and I think it would be interesting to take, recording a single hand and then immediately cut to, so like, here's the hand. Okay, I'm dealt in. I have ace 9-4, and I'm going to talk about what I think I should do in this hand. And then at the end of the hand, I'm going to then do a review of the hand, right? So I think that would make for an interesting video where it's like it starts from here's my thoughts at the table, and then I'd probably do here's my thoughts afterwards in the session review. And then maybe I'd share the hand and get an outside perspective. And 24 hours later, I can show it with whole cards revealed. And I think that would be like an interesting distillation of the process of going from like table to like final analysis, right? Like playing at the table, immediate review, deeper review and reflection, and then like all whole cards revealed for hands where it's like, well, I don't know what they had. Let's see. BuffyBot says I like it. That's a I can only say I like it that way now because I've watched the Veggie Boyd episode of Cheers so many times. One challenge I've had throughout my life is trying something and then pivoting to something else too quickly and not really going deep enough with a particular approach. On the other hand, you can basically pick an approach, go with it, and just go with it forever without any reevaluation, without any alteration. And I don't think that's great either. So what I'm trying to do now is like more kind of scientific, right? Like I spent 45 days doing a particular thing, taking one approach and going with that. What did I get out of it? What did I learn from it? What worked? What didn't work? And now I'm taking a little bit of a break, right? I took yesterday off. Today, right now, this morning, I'm just kind of spitballing and chatting. This has actually been very introspective and helpful for me. I hope that there's some value to the viewer as well. But, it's like poker stream therapy. I don't know. But then this afternoon later, I am going to stream 3 tables. We'll see how that goes. And I will set up a schedule. I'll let you know. It'll be in the Twitch schedule, but I'll have certain days when I do the morning review, and then I'll have other days, maybe some 2 stream days, where I'll do the session, the playing, and I'll line those up, and we'll just we'll see how that goes. I'll do that not for like a week. I'll do that for like a month, or I'll do that for another 45 days, right? And we'll see how that kind of turns out. I love the introspection, especially when you take the things you're learning in poker and apply it to other things and make it more general. Awesome. Thank you. There's a book that I was going to write that maybe I still will called Poker is a Skill. And originally I came up with the idea for like a poker site, like a training site called Poker is a Skill, based around the idea that, poker is a skill. But like to poker is, you could use it as a skill, like basically like to bluff or to calculate the odds and then respond accordingly based on an exploitative understanding of how the people around you behave. But to basically write a book that's like, and I put a chapter in a book that was like this, but just like, here's a bunch of poker concepts. Here are things I learned from poker. Everything in poker, like, I mean, and this is true with most things, right? But poker is such an obvious metaphor for like so many things in life, right? The balancing risk and reward, and just like understanding that everything has elements of uncertainty. I feel like poker has really helped me understand the world. And like, I'd say my worldview is basically assessing everything as like distributions of probability, right? Like such and such is probably true, or such and such is like almost definitely true. And these things intersect, and one thing might make something else more likely to be true, but just kind of understanding all knowledge as imperfect, but not unuseful, right? Because it's like, we don't have to know something for certain for that knowledge to have value, right? And you can say, oh, well then, like, do you ever really know anything? It's like, well, like, no, I guess. I mean, but so what, right? Like, you know that your experience has been such and such. You know that, certain information is true unless there's some absurd conspiracy that's, that it's all fabricated or whatever. But like any given thing, I think we can look at as sort of a distribution of probabilities of different, this can be true with outcomes, which things that haven't yet come to pass, things that haven't happened yet, but also things that have happened, but we don't know what happened, right? Like, I won't go too specific, but like, let's say somebody maybe did something and somebody else says, so-and-so did such and such, right? Based on our knowledge of the world and our knowledge of the people involved and our knowledge of cases where a person accuses another person of a particular thing, we can look and say such and such is probably true. Now, that doesn't mean that in a court of law, like, so-and-so should be convicted of such and such. But we can learn things then that shift those probabilities. And I think the hard thing is to always kind of hold things with this level of uncertainty, but not feel like it means we don't know anything. And I think that's something that poker has really driven home for me, that there are a lot of things that we know a lot about, but we don't know everything about. And that doesn't mean we know nothing about them or know nothing about them, right? We have knowledge. Something being 75% likely to be true is knowledge, right? It's not knowing in a binary fashion whether something is or isn't true, but it's knowing how likely it is to be true. And that's an actual thing that in a game like poker, we can immediately take action. Like, let's say somebody does something that looks out of line to us. We now can say, okay, I think that player is more likely to do out of line things in the future. So there's something to be gained there, right? But that doesn't mean so-and-so definitely, like, they could have misclicked. Like, maybe it's not out of line. Maybe it's a good play that we don't understand, right? So again, holding those things with some level of uncertainty, I think, is really important and really valuable. Let's go to the chat. The Ethical Poker says, the Ethical Poker. Yeah, that would be another screen name, I guess. Panda says, for me, poker has taught me to separate the results of my actions from my judgment of my action. I can do the right thing and have it not work out. I can do something really stupid and have it work out by utter dumb luck. Exactly. And that's another aspect of it, right? Results-oriented thinking versus process-oriented thinking. And in the long run, a lot of our results are going to be a result of the actions we take. They're not going to be just totally random. But there's still randomness and variance in long-run results. And there's still some little bits of, how we act causing short-term results being not always just randomness, right? And trying to separate that, trying to suss that out is difficult, right? But it's valuable. And I think it's valuable throughout life. It's not just like something that's valuable just in one spot, right? And being able to understand, I've got sort of an aphorism that I've been working on for a while, but I think humans tend to overestimate how much we can control, but underestimate how much we can influence. And there's very little that anyone can control in the short run, in the long run, right? We can influence things. Like, you could say we can control our behavior, but to some extent it's like, well, maybe our behavior is a function of chemicals floating around in our brain and electricity firing through neural pathways. And I don't know, maybe somebody has some way of inhibiting that. No, not my favorite plot device. I won't get into that more. Panda says, great stream. I have to go set up my own, but talk to you soon. I will be over on the Ethical Panda shortly. The Ethical Panda stream. So we'll do that in a little bit. But yeah, the idea that there are very few things that we have no influence over, right? There are things in the world that seem enormous, and they are. And they're the effects of millions or billions of people doing things, or they're the effects of a small number of very powerful people doing things. And we don't have control over these things, right? We don't have control over how society functions. But we have influence, right? Every single person's actions influence, to some degree or another, the environment surrounding them, the actions of other people who are in contact with them, the actions of people who know them. And so I think it's very easy to underestimate our influence because it's not control, right? Because it's not like, I'm going to make this happen by force of will because that's what I'm going to do, and then let it be so, basically. It doesn't work that way. But everything we do as an individual does have repercussions, right? It can extend out from us in waves. And, that's the sort of just being friendly to people and smiling to people, not in a creepy way, but just genuinely, right? I think can have an effect on a person's day. And then that person can have an effect on someone else's day. That doesn't mean you have to do it, but it just means something small like that maybe some small, maybe more significant act of kindness or whatever can radiate in a positive way. Like choosing not to consume some particular media or food source or whatever product, right? It's not giving money to whoever it is. Like, that's not going to be the difference, that one person, but it might influence someone else. And that can radiate, and people collectively, I think, can have a great deal of influence, which collectively could be regarded as control. But again, it's not necessarily going to be control as much because there's going to be a lot of factors. And yeah, it's just like, I don't think it's going to be hard to write a book about it. Like, I think it'll be pretty straightforward.